fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCAQ 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. David Martino is back.
I'm back.
Yeah. You made it from your submarine. Like, what's going on? How'd you get away?
I don't know. Yeah.
Man, that's scary.
I don't have any.
Yeah, you have no idea.
I don't have any quick, witty response for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you quite often don't anyway.
No, that's true.
That's crazy. Ocean Gate.
Yeah.
Down for the count. Well, it looks like the latest report is they found debris. Oof. In the area, so that's not sounding good.
No.
Not sounding good. That's too bad. You know, hopefully there's, I noticed on social media a lot of negativity and stuff. People are really mean out there sometimes.
Yeah, they are.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I like being mean to people I know.
Yeah. That's more fun.
Not to ones I don't know.
Yeah, to me.
Yeah, that's exactly. Well, it's more fun. I mean, being mean to someone I don't know doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Right? So.
The listeners tell you that all the time.
Yeah.
Keep sending them email.
Yeah, I know. I've got direct deposit right to your phone number now when they.
That's right.
Just goes right in. So
that's right in.
Yeah, deserve that. Well, we've got a returning guest here, and she's a big-time writer, New York Times bestseller, I believe. She's up there. So the new book is called The Long March Home. It's a World War II novel of the Pacific. So Tosca Lee, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Well, this is wonderful. I have to say, I wasn't expecting this kind of a book from you for some reason. Like, what got you onto this World War II?
Yeah, it's a little different for me to do this a World War II story, but, you know, I like to do unexpected things, so glad that I have fulfilled that. My co-author, I wrote this with an author named Marcus Brotherton. And my co-author is someone I've known for over a decade. He called me up around 2017 and said, hey, I've been working on this book off and on, this book idea for, about 7 years at that time, about the Bataan Death March and 3 best friends stationed in the Philippines. And he said, are you interested in coming alongside this, the story and working on it with me? Because I think I could use a co-author. And I was like, wow, I don't know anything about what went on in the Philippines during World War II. I just really didn't. And so he talked to me about his interest in it. And he had first become interested when he was interviewing Buck Compton, who was one of the original Band of Brothers, and traveling with him on another project. And a comment that Buck Compton had made stayed with Marcus for a very long time. And it was this comment about how bad things were for his unit. But he said, at least I wasn't in the Pacific because those guys really had it tough. And so that's what prompted Marcus to get involved in working on this story, and then to call me up and say, hey, I think I need a co-author. And it sounded really fascinating. It sounded like an important story. It is a chapter of World War II history a lot of people, including me, did not know much about or don't know much about. And so that's kind of how it all started.
Right. Well, it's interesting how something, like you said, he hears something like one sort of sentence and one statement, and it kind of follows an author through. Now, this is considered a historical fiction, right?
Yes, it is historical fiction. But it is inspired by true stories. And so everything that happens to the friends in this book, and it is about 3 best friends stationed in the Philippines, has happened to somebody. So it's completely inspired by true accounts.
Right. So the whole basis of it is real, but it's just sort of, there's characters in and out. What was your part in it then? What did he need you for? I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah.
But, honestly,
Yeah, I think the way he describes it is he had a draft, but he felt like he was too close to the story, which can happen.
right.
And so when I came into the process, he basically handed over his draft and said, have at it. And I really appreciate that. You probably won't hear about that happening very often in the fiction writing world. And he basically just stepped out of the picture for a while I, read it, pulled it apart, analyzed it, pulled some wires out. I went in and added a new beginning to the story, went in and added some other chapters, went in and changed some other things and, reshaped some other things. And so, added quite a bit of material. But that took quite a bit of research too. I mean, I added 5 years to this whole process because the first couple of years were just me getting up to speed and reading and learning and researching. And then towards the end, we were passing it back and forth and commenting on, kind of where we're at and sending it off to editors to tell us, how the story looked to them. And so I think he was very familiar with my work. He had read quite a few of my novels, and I think he wanted someone to come in and
So you fixed it. Tell us the
well,
truth.
not fix it so much, but it's to bring fresh eyes and to say, here's what we need, I think, to really make this story sing. And he has written one other novel, but he's best known for his World War II nonfiction, whereas I've only published novels. So
Right. Right.
yeah.
It's not very common, is it, that a lot of times fiction writers teaming up like that? I don't see it near as often as nonfiction.
Well, there's partnerships that Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child,
Right.
J.T. Ellison and Catherine Coulter. I mean, there are some long-standing partnerships that have gone on. I've written 3 books with Ted Decker, so it does happen.
It does happen.
But it's definitely a completely different process from writing a novel on your own.
I guess it would be, because you really have to kind of click too, don't you? Like, I guess there's some sort of period of time where you kind of have to feel each other out, so to speak.
Absolutely. And, luckily, I had endorsed Marcus's previous novel several years before, so I was familiar with his writing that way, familiar with his World War II work. And, we didn't know each other very well, but I have to say we became pretty good friends throughout the process. And the funny thing is, when you're passing drafts back and forth in the middle of the, evening and at all hours, and I tend to keep really weird hours, but you establish a good rapport that way. But the funny thing is, we only met in person for the very first time last October at some meetings at our publishers. And so for the 5 years that we worked together on this project, we had never met. I don't even think we even Zoomed or had a video call until we had one with our publisher. So everything was just email or on the phone.
Yeah, it's a different world, isn't it?
Crazy. Yeah.
We have working relationships with people, and a lot of times you don't meet them, or you meet them years into it and stuff. It's kind of crazy. So
Yeah.
So when you met him, did he scare you? We want some gossip here.
No.
I want some voice leads. Come on,
Marcus is a very mild-mannered, low-key person, and it's just funny because when you see pictures and you've talked to somebody for that long, and I had come downstairs. We were at this staying at the same hotel near our publishers, and when I came down in the morning, there he was, and I was like, yeah, you look like your pictures.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
right?
It's always a good thing, right?
Yeah, that would be scary.
It was funny though.
Different. Yeah, it's a different world we live in now.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think there's a lot of positives to it. A lot of people talk negative, but there's a lot of good things.
Yeah.
To what social media's brought us as well.
Yeah. Well, that ability to do the Jetsons thing and to talk over the TV screen basically is, it's pretty cool. Talking on the phone can be very cumbersome sometimes, so I find it really nice.
Yeah, and I love having a robot vacuum.
I have one of those going on downstairs right now.
Yeah, it's
thank
crazy.
goodness
I
for
have
that thing.
A robot vacuum and mop and everything. Geez, I'm crazy like that.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah, my dog likes it.
It is the Jetsons. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you, I just need that flying car next.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Oh, that'd be cool.
So what's the basic, give us a basic outline of the story, kind of where does it start and where does it take us?
Yeah, so The Long March Home is the story of three best friends. The main character is Jimmy Propfield. He is a pastor's son, and his two best friends are Hank Wright and Billy Crockett. And then their fourth best friend, who remains at home when they get shipped off to the Philippines, is Claire Crockett, Billy's older sister. And the story begins when they're in the Philippines. And honestly, it was a really plum posting to be stationed there. It was considered highly desirable. It was paradise. You're in Manila, which is the pearl of the Orient, and they've got everything from wonderful restaurants and food there to wonderful movie theaters, and the dollar goes far. Those guys all pitched in a couple bucks every month and hired locals to clean their uniforms and do kitchen duty and all that stuff. And so they were really living the good life there, especially when you consider that they came out of, the Depression. And so to live that well and have great food and meals and stuff was a wonderful thing. And you're in paradise. So it starts off and they're there, and everything seems great until the events of December 7th, 1941, when Pearl Harbor's bombed. And the thing I didn't know when Marcus first called me is that within 10 hours, the Philippines is plunged into war when Imperial Japan attacks the Philippines. And so all of a sudden, paradise for these guys just becomes a terrible hellscape for them, because not only was it war, but they were outmanned, outgunned, outprovisioned. They were sick. They were on half rations and then quarter rations, and then they were starving. And so by the time of the Allied surrender in 1942, which is the largest Allied surrender ever, you've got 60,000 Filipino soldiers and 10 or 12,000 American soldiers who become POWs and are marched 60 miles in 6 days from the Bataan Peninsula to a POW camp. And you're not allowed to stop. You're not allowed to find food, forage for food, fill up your canteen, help anyone who falls, or you're shot or bayoneted. And those who survived the war and those who survived the Death March, as it's become known, for them, it's just the beginning of almost 4 years of POW life. And so this is the story of friendship and survival and hope. And every now and then, one thing that was really important to the story for us, we step back in time and we go back to the 1930s to these kids growing up as boys in Mobile, Alabama, and we show various chapters of their life where they're doing the things that boys do, fishing and getting in trouble and all those things. And we show Jimmy falling in love with Claire and this coming of age. And so we take a break every now and then from the war, and then we return to the main storyline to see how they're going to survive.
Now, are the main characters, are they based on real people, or are they real people or completely made up?
They're made up, but the things that happen to them, especially in the Philippines, it's all inspired by true accounts. So, and it is truly horrendous. And there is a scene at the end when one of them is asked to debrief on everything that's happened. And when he talks about it, the guy who's taking the account says that he's one more lie away from a court-martial, because there's no way anyone could have survived all that. And that is really kind of the sentiment that I had when I was going in and researching all of this, that it's a true testament to the greatest generation and to the human spirit and to the bonds of brotherhood that anyone could survive any of that at all.
Did you have to take a lot of literary license to make the plot work, or were you able to follow history pretty accurately?
No, the historical part is really important to both of us. And so, no, not really. The only license we ever took was just, the stuff that happened in the boys' life as they were growing up. They got in a fight with a rival group of kids from another school, stuff like that you would make up in a story, or, the kind of the personal stakes of why it's so important to them that they all survive together, and that becomes their mantra, actually, all home alive. So, but the stuff that happened is all very true to history. And we also have an appearance by a true historical figure. Well, a few of them actually. General Wainwright's in there and some others, but there's a Filipina in there, a female guerrilla freedom fighter from the Philippines there, who was historical and fascinating and an amazing character. And so it was fun to include her as well.
When you created these guys and put them together, how do you get into the mindset of people that have gone through this, especially in the 40s, for instance, because it's a totally different time. So again, that goes back to research. But how do you experience these characters?
You know, a big part of that for me was reading survivor accounts. And those are interesting for several reasons. A lot of those guys who survived and came home never spoke about their experiences. Those who did often didn't speak about it for a long time. But those who did often went on to also record personal accounts that they self-published as books or different things that were super detailed, very interesting. And so it's important to me as a researcher and as a fiction author to go in and pick up the cadence of what it is they're talking about, to try to live vicariously through the experiences that they're writing about. So it really comes down to research, and it comes down to empathy, and really just putting yourself in that situation.
Well, so why didn't most of them speak, or took them a long time? Was it just sort of shock and stress and anxiety, or what is that? What
it was? Total PSTD. I mean, because what they went through was so horrendous, and they didn't have the language for it at the time. It was called shell shock or survivor's remorse, and when you come home from that, the sentiment was, all right, we won. The good times are here now. Let's buy a Frigidaire and get on with life. And they were the greatest generation, but many of them were also silent. And I've had many readers now write to me and say, my father served, or my grandfather served. Usually it's the father, though, in the Philippines, and he never spoke about what went on there. And now, after reading the story, I understand why. Because the events were so traumatic. I mean, you got to remember, too, that Japan had not ratified the Geneva Convention. And so they did not feel particularly obligated to treat these POWs well. And also surrender, culturally speaking, for Imperial Japan was just the worst thing you could do. It'd be much better to take your own life or die in battle. So for these POWs who had surrendered in this Allied surrender, they were really not well looked upon and not treated well.
Right. And listeners have to, especially young people listening, have to realize that it was a different time. They come back and it wasn't kind of a commonplace for, let's say, men to speak about issues like this. Like you said, how it's, there was no terms for it. It was just buck up, and be a man type thing. And that's sort of how they raised the kids, the baby boomers was very, be a man.
There wasn't much for therapy or,
right.
Whatever. Many of these survivors turned to drink and different ways of coping.
Right.
And who can blame them? It was extremely traumatic.
What was the most surprising thing you found out in doing your research about this whole scenario? Was it some of the torture or things they went through? The
torture, yes. But, any time period you study, you're going to find lots of that in different and unique ways. I think, honestly, the biggest surprise was that anybody could survive, not just the war. And these guys had dysentery and malaria, and they were starving and emaciated. And then to survive the march, and many of them died along the way, but that anybody could go through all that and somehow come out on the end of almost 4 years is just unfathomable. And the things that they would need to do to stay alive, as far as, sneaking food or trying to find friends to help look out for them, or the lengths that they would have to go to survive, were just horrific, honestly. So the fact that anybody could survive that and come home and return to a semblance of a life, and so many didn't. But I think that is the biggest surprise.
Right. And it's like, and now we have to wear a mask.
Yeah.
But I always say that because I love history and I spent a lot of time on it. And when you think about what our forefathers went through during the wars and stuff and the challenges that they had, it's just, we have so many good things today that we take it for granted, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really too bad.
I think the onus is on us to look back and remember and to educate ourselves as far as the prices that were paid for the freedoms we have today. And I think the onus is on us to do something worthwhile with our lives since they were paid for. Our freedoms were paid for so dearly.
Oh, exactly. I agree. Totally. So this is a pretty deep subject, right? And you're going through all the research and you're spending all this time on it. And it's a very important subject. So I wonder how an experience like this has changed you, like the whole process of writing the book. And now that it's published and out there, if you look back, have you noticed a change in yourself?
That's a really good question. And actually, you're the first person to ever ask me that. And the answer is yes. I pay a lot more attention to the fact that we're losing all of our World War II veterans. We're on the cusp of losing them all. I pay a lot more attention to the plight of veterans. And it's something I always was aware of and paid attention to before, but I pay more attention now. And I'm more grateful because there's no way you can delve into a history like that. And it doesn't have to be Bataan. It doesn't have to be the Philippines. It doesn't have to be World War II, but there's no way that you can take a deep dive into any war or fight for freedom and not come out of it feeling like, wow, my life is so much easier by comparison. And I hope that I'm doing something worthwhile with the freedom I've got.
Yeah, it's quite a process. So now that you've been through it too, and you look back at it, do you think you'll do this type of project again?
I'm definitely open to it. And it's funny because before Marcus called me, if you would have asked me like, hey, what about a World War II book? I would have said, I don't know enough, to do that. I don't know enough. I've never been that immersed in World War II. So I felt like, ancient wars I understand much better. I've spent much more time in my life studying ancient wars for whatever reason. But having seen firsthand, I think this is the clincher actually, having seen firsthand the personal ties that people have to World War II through their parents and grandparents and family members, it does make me, definitely feel open to telling another World War II story. Because there's so much personal stuff there with families, and there's so much nostalgia as well.
And when you write this sort of thing and you go through there's always bad characters or horrific events or bad scenes that you have to write and stuff. How do you get into that mindset, or how can you write that? How do you set yourself up to write something like that?
Yeah, those scenes are really gritty and they're very tough to write, but I'm a big believer in kind of saying it the way it is. We actually wrote stuff that was true, that happened, that we ended up pulling back just because, there's only so much a reader can take, right? And so we ended up going through and kind of picking and choosing what we felt would be, you get a certain taste of the violence and then you understand the violence. You don't need all the violence, right? And so, that was rough, but, I'm a big believer in putting yourself in the moment. And, I don't struggle with that personally, honestly. It's just every now and then you got to take a break and go watch something funny on TV.
Right.
Or
go listen to Dave on the radio.
Right. Go hug your kids. And, that's one thing that made this kind of personal for me too, is these main characters were teenagers and these guys were 18. And many of the people fighting over there were 18-year-olds. And there's documented cases of kids lying about their age to enlist. And there was a 14-year-old in the 31st Infantry who was on the Bataan Death March at the age of 15. So, I think of my 18-year-old twin boys, and it's just unfathomable.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? When you think about it, they're so young, but yet, and they had, yeah, and they really wanted to do it. A lot of people wanted to jump in there and save the world type thing. And I'm just thinking, wow, it's so brave, and you're so young, and wow,
Yeah. And, to answer your question about how do you put yourself in the middle of all the terrible stuff, I think when you read survivor accounts, that's a really big part of that. But, if people can survive that, then the least I can do is tell that story,
Yeah, right, yeah. Right. It's important. Did you have something? I mean, of course, this was Marx's book intentionally out of the go, but when you added your part to it and you were doing, like, so the new beginning and some of the stuff, was there, like, when you're writing, are you thinking about the reader, and are you thinking about what they're going to get out of the book? Or do you sort of aim things at them? Do you sort of want them to pick up things?
Yes, I wanted them to really get a sense for what this experience was like, but at the same time, I'm always conscious of the reader in several ways. One is that I need to make sure that they can fully seat themselves kind of in the skin of the main character. And this book is written in first person present tense, and so it's very immediate. You're very much in it right there. That's really important to me. That empathy is really important to me. And Jimmy, our main character, really is kind of an everyman. Hank's kind of the bad boy, and so he's lovable that way. And Billy's kind of the funny younger brother and the comedic relief. But Jimmy's an everyman. And so I think of the reader being able to step inside that vehicle of the main character and be able to go through this story and experience the horrors without traumatizing the reader as well. So there's a definite balance there. And that's why during subsequent edits, we'd go through and say, okay, here I think we've gone too far, because we want to tell the story, but we don't want to traumatize the readers at the same time. And that's part of, again, why that past storyline was so important, because it was kind of like a refreshing break from the war, and you can go back in time to the 30s when life is very simple, and just see these kids being kids.
Right, kind of the escape.
Yeah, it is.
And so, how do you, now writing this compared to what you typically write, how would you describe the difference in the writing?
Well, the writing is a totally different voice. I mean, this is a young man, a boy who grew up in Mobile, Alabama in the 30s. And so this is a completely different voice from what I normally do. My last two books, and I think those are the ones that I spoke with you last about, were the line between and a single light, and that was a pandemic duology, and that's present tense. It's a young woman going through a pandemic, and those came out right before the pandemic. But, and so that's very colloquial and very current, it may be a little socially awkward because the character is socially awkward, but I also write biblical fiction as well. And so that voice is very different as well. So, they're all different depending on the setting and the main character and how the main character relates to life in that setting.
Right. Yeah, it's quite different. How do you get yourself into the mindset of the times of the 40s? Like, even when you're going back to Alabama, did you drive to Alabama and hang out with the boys, or what? No, I mean, what is it? Is there a trick? Or
I have three boys, so I've seen kind of the funny stuff boys do firsthand. So I have three boys, but I'm familiar with Alabama. I have a good friend there who I tapped several times for details on different things. And so she fed me details and ideas about the area. She's the one who told me about the jubilees that happen right there in the Mobile area when certain weather conditions are met and the fish come up for oxygen, and you can run out and you can catch, tons of flounder, and even the crabs, will come walking up the pillars of docks and stuff, and it's a feast. So she told me about details like that, which are extremely. But yeah, to get into the mindset, it's all different things. It's a lot. It comes down to research, and research can be reading firsthand accounts. It can be watching the newsreels, the old, newsreels that would play before movies. It's seeing what the popular culture was at the time, who the movie stars were, what kids did after school, what they ate. That was really important to me to figure out, if I was a kid going to school, I didn't eat the same things that kids going to school eat today even. So, just these, and as a kid at that time, what would you listen to your parents and the adults talk about when your families got together? What was the news of the day? Those kinds of things.
Well, how did you decide? You're talking about point of view. How did you decide on this point of view, going with first person and in present tense?
Yeah. So Marcus had in his first draft, the draft at least that he sent me, he had done first person, and first person is very natural for me. I've written pretty much, I think every single one of my solo books I've written in first person. Past or present. I'm comfortable with both. Most recently, I'd written my most recent 4 books in first person present tense. And so with the goal of taking a modern reader and putting them in this immersive situation, in this chapter in history, I think first person present tense is a really good choice. Marcus started that, and I just went with it, and I'm very comfortable with that.
Well, that's crazy. It sounds like quite a book. So, what's next now? Or how do you follow up this? Huh? How do you chase this one?
I don't know. It's like you always hope that your book is going to do well, and this one, there was a time we wrote this on spec. We didn't have a contract for it or anything. It was unfunded. It was not, contracted. We wrote it and went through the editing process with freelance editors, and then we found a publisher. And after 12 years total on that, you don't know if it's any good anymore, right? So when it comes out, and this book was fortunate enough to pick up 3-starred reviews from the trade reviews and to be listed to Booklist Top 10 Historical Novels of 2023. And so that's all great, but at the same time, when stuff like that happens, then you are kind of in this, oh crap, how am I going to live up to that with my next one? So there is always that kind of fear. But the next one is a medieval thriller about the European witch hunts.
Well, that'll be good.
So, I hope so.
I think it's an interesting period of time.
We think of witch hunts and we think of Salem, where I don't remember the exact. It's like 12 people died, or it's not a lot, but relatively speaking. But in Europe, somewhere between 40,000 and 500,000 people, mostly women, died. So It's a big event.
It's just crazy how people get carried away with what they believe and what happens like this. It's just, it's amazing, but so what was how hard was the research? Did you have to spend a lot of time going through newspapers and stuff?
Yeah. I did several things that I felt really benefited the research on my end. I read several survivor self-published stories. So we're talking whole books that they put out. I also combed through a wonderful resource for anybody who's interested in this chapter of history, called Death March by Donald Knox, Knox, where he has interviews from everyone from pilots to nurses, to infantry, Army infantry, all kinds of people who were over there. And they share their experiences, and he's got them in chronological order. And so as you read through and you go back and forth between these different people, these real people, you feel like you know them and you're following them through their entire journeys, all the way into the POW camps and onto the hell ships, which is another chapter of that we include in our books as well. So that was a super valuable resource. Documentaries, really important. Anything I could get my hands on with real survivors telling their stories.
Hogan's Heroes?
Yeah, no, I have to say I'm much less familiar.
You mean that's not real?
Oh. Well, how did you keep track of continuity within this novel, to make sure that you kept true to the period?
Yeah. That's a really important question. I mean, and that's a big deal in any historical novel, because anything from, what were some of the, anything from like phrases that people say right? To the ways they might curse, or the way that the mail worked, or, the fact that, how much it costs to send a letter home, just regular mail versus on the Chinese clipper, which cost a lot more. And, so there's always little things like that we're double checking. You have to have a really fine tooth comb. And if you have a good editor too, they'll question things too if they strike them as maybe anachronistic or anything like that. But that's something I'm really, really paranoid about just normally in my writing. So I think that a certain level of being scared of getting it wrong is always a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. No, because the worst thing in the world is you're watching a historical program or a reading something, and all of a sudden, they're starting to talk like it's 2020. Oh,
yeah, I hate that.
Sorry for your loss, and they start saying all these phrases that are today, and it just throws me out of the story.
Yeah, it really bothers me when things like that happen. I mean, so even when the one kid is talking about this car, this Ford Roadster he's gonna fix up, I'm sitting there with diagrams of flathead V8 engines, just to make sure. And I am not a car person. But, between that and the weapons they used, and, it was important to know too, like, what were the radio shows on that they would listen to after school, that they might hurry home from school and go, here at a friend's house who had a radio, and all that stuff. And it's really, those are the details that make the story come alive, but you got to get them right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's important.
Yeah.
Because, it throws me out of a story, and a lot of times I can't get back to it after that. Yeah. So, it's super important.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about how people find Tosca Lee now. Do you have social media? Do you have website? Like, where do people go when they want to find Tosca?
I have all the things. You can basically Google me and you'll find me. So I have a website, and it's toscalee.com. I'm on all the social media. Honestly, I think people go to my social media, more to see my dog than to see me. But
well, that's true. That's what I do.
We have a 160-pound German Shepherd, and he's very well loved by my readers, and so I try to feature him as much as possible. But I'm on Facebook and everything, Instagram, I'm on TikTok. Not on a regular basis, but I do post stuff there. So
you go. I'm on there every day posting.
Oh no, you're posting there every day?
Yeah. I started because I was just very sparse, and I thought, and I picked up Tribal and Mastodon, and Hive and TikTok, and every morning at 5 a.m. I'm doing all the posts for the shows.
Wow.
Yeah, no, because you've got to do it regular to get out there.
I thought I was being so good.
Well, you are.
I'm just trying to be cool to my kids.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's crazy. It's amazing how time slips by and you don't realize how much time has gone by.
Oh, it's so time consuming, trying to think of fun stuff to share, content, or and the stuff that really resonates with people, or the stuff that, I've got a really stupid video on Instagram that, I don't know, it's got like 40,000 likes or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's a video of my husband, pointing at the floor and moving his finger around. I call it the poor man's cat laser, right? Yeah. And he's doing that, and the dog is trying to chase his finger. And why everybody's watching that video, I have no idea. It was funny to me at the time, but
my biggest videos are my dog. I take him out, or if he's driving and he's sitting in the lap, and I film it so that it looks like he's driving.
Oh.
People love that stuff.
They do.
Love it. That's why I say every time you're on there, just have your dog there.
Seriously.
You'll do well. It's all about the dog.
I'm going to go watch your dog videos. I'm going to get nothing done today now.
I walk my dog up the hill in the area, and we look at houses, and there's some people that have really big, gorgeous houses, and we talk about them behind their back, in front of their face. People love that stuff for some reason, and that's great.
Are you on TikTok as yourself?
Yeah, I'm on TikTok as myself.
Okay,
well, Ellen R. Warren.
I'm going to go watch
sure there's other ones. Yeah, and I think you're on there too now, aren't you, Dave?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go look at all you guys. I don't need
Dave
to be productive today. I don't need to write.
No.
I'm going to go watch dog TikToks.
Yeah, dog talk. That's
Dog
what they
talks.
should have.
Dog talk.
Dog talk.
Yeah,
Oh,
we'll make
gosh.
Now I'd follow that and cat talk.
Cat talk.
Could you imagine? Get on there. You see, you should start that.
Yeah.
You should start
Cat
dog
talk.
talk, and then you know it's all about interacting. And then you'll never get anything done except for that.
Right? I feel like during 2020, that's about all I did was watch, dog videos, cat videos,
Yeah.
anything,
Well,
Well,
why not?
Yeah.
It's fun. It was actually better than watching the people.
Yeah. I mean, you get
I hate
tired
to
of the
say it.
news after a while, so
Yeah,
there's just animal videos and reruns
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I just stopped the news. That was it.
Yeah.
I'm done. And I'd rather watch my dog.
yeah.
Anyway, well, it's been a pleasure. We'll have your book and of course your website. Everything will be up on the our website. And again, it's been a pleasure, and thank you very much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back. I truly appreciate it, and thank you for your interest in discussing the Long March Home. And really appreciate
It's been a
it. guys.
pleasure. Yeah, and the book is called The Long March Home. It's a World War II novel of the Pacific. And our guest is one of the authors, Tosca Lee. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tosca.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or show, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.